Commander Vorthenkahl had lectured about 1,000 wars, but none of them had ever really felt like one. The lecture hall on Carthos Prime hummed with restrained power. Young officers in silver uniforms, their scales catching the cold light, their eyes fixed on him with reverence. He liked that look. It reminded him that empires were built on certainty, not truth. He moved with deliberate grace before the projection wall, hands clasped behind his back as images of broken worlds flickered behind him. Charred colonies, crushed resistance, the quiet triumph of dominance. "Observe the Terran sector," he said, his voice smooth, instructive. "Primitive bipeds. Agile, aggressive, but without unity. A fascinating failure of evolution. They worship unpredictability as if chaos were a virtue." Laughter rippled through the room, sharp and obedient. Vorthen allowed it, even smiled. He had earned that authority. On the day the Empire first discovered humans, a scattered, quarrelsome species on an oxygen-rich death world, he had commanded the first containment fleet. 27 raids later, no human resistance lasted longer than an hour. Their defiance was admirable but hopeless. They were animals who'd learned language too early. A cadet raised her crest in a gesture of curiosity. "Commander, why haven't we simply eliminated them? Why maintain observation outposts on such unstable worlds?" "Because extinction is expensive," he said lightly, "and unnecessary. The Empire values efficiency, not sentiment. The humans provide an excellent case study in self-destruction." His lips curved faintly. "You can learn much from watching them burn themselves." The room erupted in approving laughter again. Vorthen's voice dropped, softer now. "History rewards understanding, cadets. Remember that. Fear is a tool for those who don't." That was when the doors hissed open. A junior officer stumbled in, breathless, armor unfastened, eyes wide. The laughter died instantly. Vorthen's gaze sharpened. "Report." "Unidentified vessel, sir," the officer said, voice trembling. "Human configuration, but unusual readings. It crossed the neutral zone an hour ago. Refused to respond to hails." "Then destroy it," Vorthen said, almost bored. "Already attempted, sir." The ensign's throat flexed, uncertain. "Our targeting systems failed. Entire fleet disabled for 30 seconds. Then the human ship transmitted a message." Vorthen lifted a brow. "A message?" The ensign swallowed hard. It said, "Class is in session." For a heartbeat, silence thickened the air. Then one cadet snorted. The sound spread, brittle and nervous, until the entire room laughed again. Vorthen let it play out. He folded his arms, concealing the faint unease in his chest. Amusing. A desperate taunt before destruction. I suppose we should applaud their sense of humor. Still, he ordered his cruiser prepped. Hours later, Vorthen stood on the bridge of the Veilstrom, the largest vessel in the sector. His command officers moved with rehearsed precision around him. Through the viewports stretched the human ship, a single gray speck, drifting motionless against the red nebular haze. No escorts. No signal. A ghost. "Open a channel," Vorthen ordered. The comms officer hesitated. "Sir, it's already open." A faint shimmer filled the air. Then a human appeared, projected light forming a man's image standing right there on Vorthen's bridge. He wore a dark uniform with unfamiliar insignia, his hair cropped short, his face calm. "Commander Vorthenkahl," the human said in fluent trade common, his tone almost conversational. "I'm Instructor Hale, Terran Strategic Corps." The bridge fell silent. Vorthen's voice, when it came, was measured. "You're trespassing in Imperial space, human. Your ship will be dismantled. Your body will be studied. Your arrogance will be educational." Hale's mouth twitched in something that might have been amusement. "Good. I'm here to teach." That earned a chuckle from one of Vorthen's officers. The commander tilted his head slightly, curiosity pricking through irritation. "You believe you can teach us?" "Not believe," Hale said simply. "No." Vorthen gestured toward the viewport. "You are surrounded by 17 cruisers and 3 planetary defense stations. You have no weapons online. This is not a negotiation, human. It's an autopsy." Hale regarded him in silence for several long seconds. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, almost pitying. "Funny thing about classrooms, Commander. The loudest student always thinks they're the teacher." The image flickered once. Then the human smiled, a small, knowing expression. "You might want to brace for the next lesson." "Fire," Vorthen ordered. Nothing happened. Every console on the bridge went dark. Officers shouted, scrambling over dead panels. The hum of the ship's core faded to silence. Outside, one by one, the Imperial vessels drifted, powerless, motionless, as though frozen in time. Vorthen gripped the command rail. "What did you do?" Hale's hologram remained perfectly calm. "Opened your eyes. Temporarily." Gravity failed next. Bodies lifted from the floor, drifting gently, like leaves on still air. Panic broke out in fragmented shouts. Vorthen's hand reached for his sidearm out of instinct, but it floated uselessly beside him. The human's face softened. "Don't worry, Commander. No one's dying today. We're just adjusting your curriculum." And then, as quietly as it had begun, everything snapped back. Lights returned. Gravity reasserted itself with a sharp pull. Officers fell to the floor in groaning heaps. Only Vorthen remained standing, one hand gripping the rail. The hologram of Hale straightened his collar. Class dismissed. The projection dissolved. A heartbeat later, the human vessel detonated, but not like any explosion Vorthen had seen. No light, no heat, just a pulse, expanding outward in absolute silence. When the sensors finally returned, there was nothing left, not the ship, not its energy signature. Only the ghostly echo of residual gravitational waves, patterned like deliberate code. Vorthen stared into the void. His reflection looked older than it had an hour ago. "Recover the fleet," he ordered. His voice was steady, but something underneath it had fractured. Every survivor, every scrap of data. Now. No one moved. They only looked at him, wide-eyed and shaken. It took him a moment to realize why. There were no survivors. He turned slowly toward the comms officer, who whispered, "Sir, the other ships, they're gone." Gone. Not destroyed. Just not there. Outside, the nebula glowed faintly, as though mocking him with its quiet beauty. Vorthen exhaled through his teeth, long and controlled. He felt, for the first time in his life, the cold weight of something he didn't understand. The thought pressed itself into his mind like a whisper. Perhaps the humans weren't the lesson. Perhaps we were. He straightened, forcing authority back into his posture. "Signal command," he said. Tell them the humans have begun teaching." And though no one dared speak it aloud, every officer on that bridge understood something fundamental had shifted. The Empire had always believed it ruled the stars, but somewhere, out in the dark, the students had started writing their own syllabus. Vorthen looked once more into the endless black. For the briefest instant, he imagined he could still hear it, the faintest echo of human laughter, distant, unhurried, and utterly unafraid. The Imperial Council chamber was carved from obsidian and arrogance. High walls curved into a dome alive with holographic constellations, each representing a conquered system. Commander Vorthen Call stood at its center, flanked by two silent guards, staring at those glittering stars as if they might rearrange themselves into an answer. He had been summoned, interrogated, and now, inevitably, dismissed. "Your report strains credibility," intoned High Marshal Saraxis, his voice the polished calm of someone who had never known fear. "A single human vessel disabling an entire fleet? A dramatic story, but unconvincing. Perhaps the trauma has affected your judgment." Vorthen kept his posture rigid. His body bore no visible scars, but his mind was marked by the memory of the silent pulse, by Hale's calm eyes. "I am not mistaken, Marshal. I saw the data before it was erased. They weren't improvising. They were demonstrating." A ripple of laughter passed among the council. To them, humans were animals that mimicked intellect through noise. "Demonstrating what?" another asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "That they understand us better than we understand them," Vorthen said quietly. "They wanted to show restraint, not destruction. That should terrify you." The silence that followed was uncomfortable, not respectful. The council members exchanged smirks and faintly pitying looks, as though addressing a brilliant officer who had finally cracked under pressure. Saraxis leaned forward, his ornate armor whispering against the dais. "Commander Call, you are relieved of field duty pending evaluation. The Empire cannot afford hysteria in its officers." Hysteria. The word bit deeper than an accusation of failure. Vorthen saluted, mechanical, his movements as precise as ever. When he turned to leave, the chamber's doors closed behind him with a hiss that sounded too much like finality. Outside, the corridors of the capital were radiant with motion. Bureaucrats, soldiers, civilians, all moving as if nothing had changed. The Empire still glittered, proud and blind. Yet the rhythm of the place felt wrong to him, its symmetry false. Every face he passed looked like a portrait painted over cracks. He paused at a balcony overlooking the sprawl of Carthos Prime. The city pulsed with the lights of triumph, but somewhere beyond the horizon, he imagined the emptiness where his fleet should have been. In that silence, the echo of Hale's words returned, unsettlingly gentle. "Funny thing about classrooms, Commander." He didn't realize he'd spoken aloud until a voice behind him answered, still haunted by the phantom teacher. It was Admiral Vrain, older, heavier, and as humorless as ever. His tone was meant to soothe, but only sharpen the edge of contempt. "I am haunted," Vorthen said, "by the Council's refusal to listen." "Then let it go," Vrain advised, resting a hand on the railing. "The humans have been contained for decades. Whatever you encountered was an anomaly, some ancient weapon triggered by accident. We'll find the mechanism, dissect it, and move on." Vorthen's gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. "And if there is no mechanism? If what I saw wasn't technology, but intent?" Vrain sighed. "Intent requires intelligence, Call, and humanity has none to spare." He walked away before Vorthen could answer, leaving the commander with the sinking feeling that logic was no longer the Empire's strongest weapon. Later that night, in the privacy of his quarters, Vorthen replayed the surviving fragments of sensor data, most of it corrupted, but one file remained intact. A faint gravitational fluctuation sequence, coded with mathematical precision. It wasn't random interference, it was deliberate. A message hidden in the fabric of the pulse itself. The translation software refused to interpret it as language. Vorthen didn't need it to. He recognized the rhythm, 8-second intervals like a heartbeat, like laughter. He should have reported it, but instead he encrypted it under personal access. Whatever this was, it wasn't meant for the Council. It was meant for him. Thousands of light years away, beneath the crust of a dying Earth, General Arya Hale stood in a dimly lit chamber of steel and silence. A vast table displayed galactic projections, crimson dots marking former human colonies, each one taken, burned, or erased by the Empire. Yet her eyes weren't on the map. They were on the single green light pulsing at its edge. It marked the last signal from her brother's ship before it vanished. The technicians around her spoke in low voices, none daring to meet her gaze. Project Harbinger was finally active, its years of secret preparation moving into the open. She had trained herself for this moment, but when the reality arrived, it hurt like betrayal. Her brother's sacrifice had been calculated. He'd known he wouldn't return, but she hadn't expected the message to reach her so clearly. She touched the console. The voice that played was faint but steady. "Arya, they'll never see it coming. When they think they've won, remind them what learning costs." Static consumed the rest. Her second-in-command, Captain Wren, stood behind her, arms crossed. "Ma'am, with the success of the demonstration, the Strategic Council is requesting deployment authorization. Harbinger's Phase 2 can begin." Arya's expression remained unreadable. "And the psychological readiness of the crews?" "Mixed," Wren admitted. "Some are eager. Others don't understand why we waited this long." "Because victory without comprehension isn't victory," she said. "It's repetition. We're not here to burn the galaxy. We're here to make it think." Wren hesitated. "Do you think they'll understand that?" She almost smiled. "No, not yet." The holomap adjusted automatically as coded transmissions poured in. Human fleets, small, hidden, coordinated through stealth channels, were already maneuvering near border systems. They weren't striking yet. They were watching, learning, preparing. For decades, humanity had played the role of prey so convincingly that even the predators stopped questioning the act. Project Harbinger was never about vengeance, Arya murmured, half to herself. It was about evolution. Wren nodded slowly. "And your brother's message?" She looked up at the galaxy's swirling expanse, her eyes glinting with something colder than grief. He opened the class. Back on Carthos Prime, Vorthen stood before his mirror, adjusting the insignia the Council had stripped from him earlier that day. They gleamed too brightly against his dark uniform, as though mocking his demotion. But beneath the anger was something else, an unspoken certainty that he had been right. The humans hadn't stumbled into power. They had walked into it deliberately, one careful step at a time. He turned off the lights, but the reflection of the stars through his window lingered, pale and silent. Each one looked like an eye watching. A faint chime from his console drew his attention. A message blinked on the screen, unsigned, encrypted beyond Imperial codes. He opened it without hesitation. The text was short, no introduction, no threat, just a sentence that made his breath catch. "Lesson 2. You weren't dismissed, Commander. You were enrolled." The message erased itself instantly, leaving only the faint pulse of the screen. Vorthen stared at the emptiness, then whispered to no one, "Then let's see what you're teaching." Outside, the night deepened over Carthos Prime, beautiful and indifferent. In its silence, a war had already begun, though no one yet dared to name it. Reports of the disappearances arrived with unnerving regularity, first a border outpost, then an entire mining system, then the Alaris trade route itself. No explosions, no wreckage, just silence. Command logs ended mid-sentence, and distress signals cut off with mechanical precision. The Empire, vast and ancient, was accustomed to disorder. But this was not chaos. It was choreography. Commander Vorthen Call sat alone in his dim office, reviewing what fragments remained. The official explanation labeled the events as spatial storms. He knew better. Storms didn't move in perfect intervals or erase evidence with surgical restraint. The humans were moving, but not in ways the Empire could measure. Every incident aligned along predictable coordinates, triangulating toward the heart of Imperial space like the tightening noose of a teacher's patient hand. He had stopped sleeping. Each night, he found himself replaying Hale's final words, lesson dismissed, like a mantra he didn't yet understand. There had been no arrogance in that human's tone, only certainty, the calm of someone who knew where every move would lead. When he sent another encrypted analysis to the Council, it was returned unopened. A junior official attached a note. "Commander, your imagination is becoming a liability." He deleted the message without responding. Instead, he went digging where he shouldn't. Human cultural archives, banned, fragmented, half-erased by Imperial censors, became his new battlefield. He combed through old military footage, speeches, and field recordings from human wars stretching across centuries. What he found disturbed him far more than their weapons. Humans did not fight for empire or ideology. They fought for the act itself, as if conflict were a language only they truly spoke. He paused one evening at a grainy video showing soldiers trudging through smoke and mud, carrying one another through a field of fire. They were laughing. The sound was coarse, ugly, genuine. Laughter in the face of death, something no Carthan would ever understand. He realized with a quiet dread that this was why the Empire had always misread humanity. To humans, survival was not victory, it was the beginning of the next challenge. When the summons finally came, he was almost relieved. The council chamber felt colder this time, the air taut with desperation disguised as authority. High Marshal Saraxis spoke first, his tone sharp and defensive. "Commander Call, explain these anomalies in your sector. Are the humans responsible?" "Yes," Vorthen said simply. "They're testing us, mapping our habits. Every silence, every disappearance, it's a measurement. They're studying the Empire as a scientist studies a specimen." The room bristled. "And what is your proof?" one admiral demanded. "My proof," Vorthen said, leaning forward, "is that we've given them everything they need. Every colony they conquered, every signal we sent in retaliation, data. They've been patient. Too patient." A ripple of unease moved across the gathered faces. The Empire had never tolerated patience in others. It was a trait reserved for rulers, not the ruled. Saraxis sneered. "You claim they've learned to dismantle our fleets without firing? Absurd. Primitive worlds don't birth strategic geniuses." Vorthen met his gaze. "Then how do you explain the loss of 42 systems in 3 months?" No one answered. "They're not attacking," he continued. "They're reorganizing us. Each missing system was an energy node, a communication hub, or a logistics base. They're pruning the network, forcing our structure to collapse inward." One of the younger generals slammed a fist onto the table. "Then we strike Earth itself. Burn it clean and end this farce." Vorthen almost pitied him. "You can't strike what isn't there. Earth's coordinates have been falsified across all archives. We don't even know if they still live there. You're swinging at ghosts." The silence that followed was heavy. No one liked ghosts. Ghosts didn't surrender. Saraxis dismissed him with a wave. "Enough speculation. The Council will decide strategy without the input of paranoid veterans." Vorthen didn't salute this time. He simply turned and left. Outside, the corridor lights flickered. A faint tremor pulsed through the floor, subtle but rhythmic, like the heartbeat of something vast. When he reached his quarters, his console was already active. A message blinked at the center of the screen, encrypted with an unfamiliar signature. Lesson 2. Observation without comprehension is blindness. Attached were coordinates, Imperial defense grids along the central communication spine. He recognized them immediately. The humans weren't just cutting outposts now. They were moving toward the Empire's throat. He tried to warn Command, but the network was already stuttering, signals colliding in corrupted loops. Reports flooded in, ships frozen mid-flight, planetary defense arrays deactivated by unknown commands, orbital AI cores rewriting themselves. Human intrusion, invisible and elegant, slipped through every protocol like water through fractured stone. He ran to the control center, where officers shouted over one another, their screens dissolving into static and foreign symbols. It wasn't destruction, it was translation. The systems weren't dying, they were adapting, rewriting themselves according to new instructions. "Shut it down," someone screamed. Vorthan watched the code shift faster than their systems could trace. The Imperial emblem at the center of the room's main display fractured into cascading shapes before reforming into something terrifyingly simple, a human hand. A voice followed, not broadcast, not transmitted, but resonant, as if the air itself had learned to speak. Lesson 3, Commander Call. Structure reveals weakness. The room fell silent. No one moved. The voice had used his name. He turned slowly toward the ceiling, as if expecting to see Hale's face there. "What do you want?" he said aloud. There was no reply. Only the soft hum of machines now loyal to someone else. When the lights returned, the command center was a graveyard of obedience. Officers stared at their consoles in mute disbelief. Every screen now displayed the same message, glowing in calm white text, "Prepare for integration." Vorthan closed his eyes. They had done it, not with fleets or fire, but with understanding. The humans had rewritten the Empire's own logic. What the Carthans built to control others had become the instrument of their own subjugation. He felt neither fear nor rage, only a grim clarity. They had not lost to a superior weapon, but to a superior philosophy. Later, he stood on the balcony of his quarters, watching the horizon ripple with strange light. The stars above seemed to shift, constellations rearranging into deliberate patterns. For a moment, he thought he recognized them, lines connecting into the shape of a spiral, a fingerprint stretching across the heavens. Behind him, his console chimed again. One more message waited. Final lesson approaching. Attendance mandatory. He looked out over the Empire's capital, the city's glow dimming as systems surrendered to new command. And in that quiet, he understood that the war was no longer about survival or victory. It was about comprehension, and the humans were the only ones who had ever truly studied the test. He straightened, his jaw tightening as the first human signals pulsed through the sky, soft and steady like a heartbeat. The lesson was almost over, but not for him. He whispered to the night, "Then I'll be your best student." The stars above Carthos Prime shimmered with unnatural symmetry. To the naked eye, they looked like constellations, but to Commander Vorthan Call, they were coordinates. Each point of light corresponded to a human fleet waiting in perfect silence, surrounding the Imperial core like an elegant, invisible cage. No thunder, no warning, only geometry and inevitability. The Empire's heart had never been so quiet. He stood in the war room, watching as officers scrambled beneath the flicker of failing lights. Their voices trembled with disbelief. "They've shut down our weapon grids," one shouted. "Every orbital defense is offline." "Not destroyed," another murmured. "Just repurposed." Vorthan said nothing. He could see it in the data streams cascading across the hollow table, lines of code rewritten with surgical precision. The Empire's own AI cores were now broadcasting in a new dialect, human. Not conquered, but converted. A whisper of static crossed the comm line, followed by a voice both hauntingly calm and human. "Commander Call." He turned toward the sound instinctively, though it came from nowhere and everywhere at once. "Arya Hale," he said, recognizing the tone instantly. "Your empire has reached its final equation," she said. "Do you understand it yet?" Vorthan's jaw clenched. "You've dismantled entire worlds with words." Hale's tone softened, almost mournful. "No, we dismantled ignorance. The war you built on domination was unsustainable. You ruled through fear. We learned to rule through comprehension." Her voice was replaced by the quiet hum of the ship's systems, as if the very metal around him was listening. "You've rewritten everything," he said softly. "Even the machines obey you now." "They obey clarity," she replied. "We just speak its language better." The lights dimmed, replaced by a projection of the surrounding fleet, an ocean of ships arranged in perfect alignment, each one a heartbeat in the vast pulse of human orchestration. For a fleeting second he admired it. The symmetry, the discipline, the terrifying beauty of control without cruelty. The central hollow flickered again, revealing Hale's face this time, her eyes sharp but tired. "Commander, the Empire's council has fallen. Your world is the last node in their network. We can end this cleanly." He studied her. "And if I refuse, then your refusal becomes another lesson." The air in the room thickened as though the ship itself waited for his answer. Vorthen exhaled slowly, the weight of years pressing into his voice. "You don't want destruction, General. You want acknowledgement." Hale didn't deny it. "Acknowledgement," she said, "and understanding. War is just the crude dialect of misunderstanding. We intend to retire it." He almost smiled. "You sound like my historians once did before they burned their books to build warships. Then maybe this is your chance to rewrite one." He turned toward the viewport. Outside, the skies of Carthos shimmered with moving light as the human fleet began its slow descent, not as conquerors, but as surgeons. Every maneuver was precise, clinical. Even now, in the Empire's final hour, humanity refused spectacle. They dismantled with grace. The officer beside him spoke in a hoarse whisper. "Commander, our planetary core defenses await your authorization. One command and we can—" "No," Vorthen interrupted. The officer froze. "Sir, if we fire, we confirm their lesson, that fear is our only truth." He turned back to Hale's projection. "If I surrender, you'll have what you came for. But understand this, General, control is fragile. You'll inherit a galaxy that only obeys until it remembers how to hate." Hale nodded once. "Then we'll teach it to understand before it remembers." Something in her voice, steady, sorrowful, unsettled him more than any threat. It was conviction without malice. The next moments unfolded like choreography. Imperial weapons powered down across the planet, their crimson signatures dimming into cool blue as the new human code propagated. The Empire's insignia on every building, ship, and console melted into a twin emblem, a spiral intersected by a human hand. From orbit, it must have looked like the death of tyranny. From the ground, it felt like rebirth, one that no one had asked for. Hale's transmission expanded into the sky, projected across every Imperial world. To the citizens of the Carthan Dominion, her voice announced, calm and measured. "This is not subjugation. This is instruction. You are no longer subjects of empire, but participants in survival. Humanity does not enslave. We adapt, and we bring adaptation to you." Her words rolled across the world, like a tide. People listened not because they had to, but because they could not look away. Vorthen felt something strange at his chest, not rage, not despair, but awe. She was doing what no conqueror had ever managed, transforming victory into revelation. He turned toward his subordinates. "Evacuate the upper sectors. Deactivate the council vaults. We're done pretending this war can still be won." "Commander," one of them whispered, "what will happen to us?" He met the officer's gaze. "We'll learn." When the transmission ended, Hale appeared again, her tone quieter. "There's a place for you, Call. Not as a prisoner, as an advisor. You understand us better than your leaders ever did." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "I understand that your mercy terrifies me more than your weapons." "Then it's working," she said softly. He looked back at the sky one last time. The human fleet was beginning its movement toward deeper space, toward the next horizon. They hadn't come to rule. They had come to teach, and the galaxy was their unwilling classroom. Something in him shifted. The rage that had once fueled his loyalty dissolved into something quieter, comprehension. "You could have destroyed us," he said. "Why didn't you?" Hale's reply came like a closing door. "Because destruction ends lessons. We prefer continuity." And then she was gone. The silence that followed was profound. Vorthen stood in the command center of a dead empire and realized that humanity's true weapon had never been its ships, nor its soldiers. It was its curiosity, the same relentless, dangerous curiosity that could turn a species into a force of nature. He walked to the balcony overlooking the capital. The once proud banners of the Carthan Dominion lay folded in the dust, replaced by a single human beacon pulsing gently above the skyline. The people below stared upward, their fear slowly eroding into bewilderment. Vorthen spoke softly to the night, to the unseen woman who had remade the stars. "The murderer walked into class," he murmured, recalling the first message, but the human chuckled. He let the words linger, then finished the thought himself. because the lesson was never about survival. It was about evolution. The sky shimmered once more, as if the stars themselves approved. The Empire was gone, but something greater, something unsettlingly alive, had taken its place. Vorthen straightened his uniform, the insignia now a blend of two histories. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a soldier. He felt like a student. And far above, in the cold silence of orbit, humanity's fleets moved again, not toward battle, but toward the unknown, carrying their new allies with them. The galaxy watched, trembling, as the next lesson began.